Right, so as fearful as many have been already about the gradual weakening in apparent safeguards in the assisted dying bill as it continues to progress through Parliament, matters have now become all the more terrifying as Labour have now introduced a profit-driven motive, it seems, into the bargain as well. Because of course they have. It is now being proposed that not only should assisted dying become law, with the lack of judicial oversight and lack of safeguards that were originally being promised that have gradually been wittered away, but that it should be outsourced to private companies in order to make a profit out of ending people's lives. What could possibly go wrong there? Well, after decades of seeing services privatised and what that has caused, often rising bills and poorer services, the one thing they all have in common is maximising profits at our expense. The terrifying prospect here is that coercion in the name of making money will become the driving factor should this bill become law. The best interest of the patient would no longer be the central issue, and as such concerns have soared, and an MP's wavering over their continued support for this bill should listen to that. A profit motive on a matter like this shows the whole idea now needs to be the only thing that gets killed off. Right, so the UK's assisted dying bill, championed by Labour MP Kim Ledbetter, has already been sparking a lot of heated debate, it has to be said. But now comes a massive warning about it, on top of all of those that have already come before it, that this is actually now being seen as a profit opportunity for companies already profiting massively from NHS contracts. Whilst proponents argue that it offers a compassionate choice for those suffering from terminal illnesses, an issue and a debate I have a great deal of sympathy for as it happens, having lost both of my parents to horrendous terminal illnesses. For a long while, that is not how this Labour proposal has been seen, and now the cat appears to be well and truly out of the bag on that. The bill is riddled already with ethical, legal and practical pitfalls, too many of which gone continuously grossly unreported. But the most alarming concern that has dropped now, though, is the potential outsourcing of assisted dying services to private companies, a move that could see NHS profiteers capitalising on the most vulnerable in society, leading to coercion for them to end their lives in the name of making money. So we need to take a good look at the implications of this bill then, for all of our sakes. It could end up affecting any of us after all. But most especially now, the troubling prospect of profit-driven coercion in assisted dying is being championed by Starmer's Labour, as well as the weakening of safeguards, the lack of scrutiny and the secrecy surrounding the bill as well, which have continued to raise understandable concerns amongst the public, amongst healthcare professionals and other politicians as well, who ultimately have the power to end this thing if life itself is to become just another cash cow for capitalism. So let's start with having a look at the assisted dying bill in light of the potential outsourcing of these termination of life services to private companies. According to reports, the Labour government of Keir Starmer, a man with all the charisma of a corpse, so there may be a correlation there, is considering privatisation of assisted dying. The justification to do so being to alleviate pressure on the NHS. This new service that they're talking about introducing would be just another burden being placed on that overworked and understaffed service, you understand. Itself still being set up for more carving up for private interests as the NHS is. So why not just skip to the privatisation bit from the very start then? Seems to be the case. Well, obviously it then introduces that profit motive into the equation, doesn't it? This move has been met with widespread criticism, quite understandably therefore, with opponents arguing that if it introduces that profit motive into a deeply sensitive and ethical issue as it does, then that becomes the driving factor. Outsourcing assisted dying to private companies could end up creating a perverse incentive for these firms to maximise profits by encouraging more people to opt for assisted suicide. And this then raises the chilling prospect of vulnerable individuals being coerced into ending their lives prematurely, not out of genuine desire, nor of any real need necessarily, but in order to satisfy corporate bottom lines. The involvement of private companies in assisted dying is particularly troubling given the Labour Party's recent track record on healthcare, led by Wes Streeting, as we should all know by now, who is hell-bent on bringing in more private provision in the name of efficiency, when so many private clinics use NHS staff already and is therefore a complete nonsense. But then he is full of it. This is a government that is prioritising cost-cutting and privatisation over patient welfare and our need for the NHS, and we know all this by now. It's just adding on to the 14 years of the Tories that we've already had. No change. Well, Labour's assault on the sick and disabled plays into this picture as well now, with the threat to benefit cuts, reform to disability benefits, particularly in the name of getting more people off support that they need, get them back into work. That's the ethos, even if they can't, of course. But against this backdrop, you have this story now of the outsourcing of assisted dying services appearing to be part of a broader agenda that prioritises financial efficiency over human dignity. Private companies driven by profit may pressure individuals, particularly the elderly, the disabled, the long-term sick, to choose assisted dying as a way to reduce the financial burden on families and the state, which is a narrative that is constantly being thrown at those demographics these days, that they are somehow worth less because they are seen as a drain on society, or that it's a narrative that gets pervaded through our media, rather than society actually being about people as it should be, and it should be measured by how they care for their elderly and their infirm and their disabled. Another major concern surrounding the bill has of course been the weakening of the safeguards and the lack of parliamentary scrutiny surrounding it. The bill as it stands removes the requirement for High Court oversight now in assisted dying cases. This is a significant departure from previous proposals which emphasised the need for judicial approval in all cases to ensure that decisions are made voluntarily and without coercion. Therefore, the removal of High Court oversight would be a grave mistake that will leave individuals at heightened risk of abuse now that you're bringing financial benefits into the equation as well for the companies overseeing it. The High Court would provide a crucial safeguard by ensuring that each case is thoroughly reviewed and that all legal and ethical criteria are being met. This was in fact the linchpin condition that many MPs backed the bill over last time it was voted on, and with that removed and a profit motive now put in, many of them should be very worried about this. But like all public services though, the High Court is already struggling to cope with its existing workload, again overworked and underfunded, and the addition of the assisted dying cases could overwhelm the system, we're being told, and this is why they need to be removed from this story. That should mean we simply can't afford to progress with this bill, in which case that would be the unaffordable bit, because without the obviously necessary judicial oversight, it's a really, really bad piece of legislation, a seriously scary piece of legislation. And of course, this has all now raised serious questions about the feasibility of the bill and the potential for errors or oversights in the decision-making process, especially with that profit motive now being introduced. There has to be robust oversight in law. Without that robust oversight, there is a real risk that individuals can be pressured into assisted dying without fully understanding all of their options, all in the name of profit, for not so much private health companies, but merchants of death as they would become without judicial supervision. And then there is the lack of scrutiny surrounding this bill that has been a source of frustration for many, making people wonder what is being hidden. And the sudden prospect of a profit motive should be ringing massive alarm bells for those who have still been supporting this bill in Parliament. Kim Ledbetter, who is the bill's primary advocate, has been accused of shielding it from proper parliamentary debate, with Ledbetter having resisted calls for a more thorough examination of the bill's provisions, leading to accusations of secrecy, accusations of a lack of transparency, and saddling her with a not undeserved reputation for wanting assisted dying at any cost. So this is all added to grave concerns that the government is rushing the bill through Parliament without adequately addressing the ethical and practical challenges it poses, and are in fact adding more fuel to that fire by mooting the prospect of outsourcing it all now. And a notable intervention on the consequences of this bill, as it stands currently, has actually come from the former Director of Legislative Affairs at Number 10, Nikki DaCosta, who summed all of this up quite well in a single tweet, saying, "Under this bill, they'd be exempt from any civil liability, clause 25. Deaths would be exempt from investigation by a coroner, clause 29. There'll be a code of practice, but it's only something you have to have regard to, and failure to follow the code is not itself a problem. And the only monitoring will be by a commissioner. The independent scrutiny by the chief medical officer is to be removed. There is no regulator, no licensing requirement, no duties private providers would have to comply with. The bill is utterly silent on absolutely essential issues. So if this is what the sponsor and government are comfortable with, they need to work through this rapidly." In this context, though, the introduction of assisted dying raises the spectre of profit-driven coercion without any consequences at all on the face of it. No oversight for abusing the service. Private companies, incentivized by financial gain, will exploit the vulnerabilities of affected individuals because it's what happens every time under privatisation. encouraging them to choose assisted dying as a way to reduce costs and increase efficiency for their own benefit. But sold to the people in question as a way to avoid being a burden, psychological abuse, as that would be motivated by profit. Already there are reports of NHS workers voicing their fears about the potential for abuse. So this isn't just theoretical mudraking here. Healthcare professionals have expressed concern that the bill could lead to a very slippery slope, where the criteria for assisted dying gets gradually expanded to include non-terminal conditions and individuals who are deemed to be a financial burden on the state. And certainly Kim Ledbetter, having opined that those with mental health issues could access the system as well, is another flashing red warning over this bill. The secrecy and lack of scrutiny surrounding the assisted dying bill have caused widespread concern from members of the public, disability rights organisations, elderly rights organisations, healthcare professionals, members of the judiciary and politicians alike. So many people from all walks of life feel that the government is rushing this bill through Parliament without adequately addressing the ethical and practical challenges it poses, and now adds even more concern to that with the prospect that they privatise the whole thing. There has to be a more thorough and transparent debate with input from healthcare professionals, ethicists and the wider public, because without that, the only place this bill is fit for is the dustbin. For more on how people with mental health issues could now be offered assisted dying, presumably to save cash on already underfunded mental health services, because frankly, what is funded properly anymore? Check out this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe before you do so, though, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new content published daily on this channel, as well as helping to support the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated. And I will hopefully catch you therefore on the next vid. Cheers, folks.